I was in my mid-20s when my girlfriend took a 6-month contract job in Florida. We didn't want to break up, so we decided to try long distance. The drive from my home to her apartment was a little over 12 hours. I actually didn't mind it. Usually I'd take Friday off, leave around 5 a.m., and spend the entire day driving. I'd arrive sometime in the evening, and we'd have all day Saturday together. The only thing I hated was the traffic. So on my final trip before her contract ended, I decided to do something different. Instead of leaving Friday morning, I left Thursday evening. My plan was simple: drive through the night. No traffic, no delays, and hopefully I'd arrive in Florida before sunrise. For the first few hours, everything went exactly as planned. There was some traffic early on, but once the sun went down, the highways became almost completely empty. By around 11 p.m., I was making incredible time. Then sometime after midnight, I started getting tired. Not normal tired, the kind of tired where keeping your eyes open feels like actual work. My head started dropping. I'd catch myself drifting for a second before forcing my eyes open again. I knew I couldn't keep driving like that. Then I saw a highway sign. Rest area, 2 miles. 2 miles. I told myself I could make it. Those 2 miles felt endless, but somehow I made it to the exit and pulled into the rest area. The place was almost completely deserted. There was a small brick building with an open entrance. No restaurant, no gas station, no bright lights. Just 2 bathrooms and a nearly empty parking lot. I parked, got out, and started stretching. Then I noticed another car. It was parked all the way across the lot. A dark blue vehicle. I couldn't tell if someone was inside. At the time, I didn't care. I was exhausted. I just needed a few minutes to wake myself up. After stretching, I walked toward the bathrooms. I tried the men's room. Locked. I figured someone was inside, so I walked back outside. 10 minutes passed. Still locked. Still no one came out. I knocked. Nothing. Not even a sound. That's when I started feeling uneasy, because there was something I hadn't noticed before. The other car was no longer across the parking lot, and I couldn't remember hearing it move.
I stood there for a few seconds, staring across the parking lot. The other car was gone. At least, that's what I thought. I looked toward the women's bathroom. The door was unlocked. I knocked lightly. "Hello? Anyone in there?" No response. I waited another few seconds before stepping inside. I locked the door behind me. I felt ridiculous being in the women's restroom, but I didn't want some random person walking in while I was there. I quickly washed my hands and splashed cold water on my face. That helped. I was finally starting to feel awake again. Then I heard a tap. I froze. It came from the bathroom door. One soft knock, then another. I turned off the faucet. "Sorry," I called out. "I'll be out in a second." Silence. Then the knocking started again. Except this time, it wasn't a knock. Someone began pounding on the door. Hard. Repeatedly. I stood there completely still, wondering who was outside. The pounding continued for several seconds. Then suddenly, it stopped. I waited. Nothing. Finally, I unlocked the door and slowly opened it. Nobody was there. But something else had changed. The men's restroom across the hallway was now slightly open. And underneath the door was something I hadn't seen before. Mud. There was a trail of muddy footprints leading from the men's restroom toward the women's restroom. Right toward me. My stomach tightened. I stepped into the hallway. That's when I saw the car. It was parked directly beside mine. The same dark blue vehicle I'd seen across the lot earlier. I couldn't see anyone inside. But more muddy footprints led from the restroom toward my car. This time, they stopped beside the driver's door. I suddenly didn't feel tired anymore. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe the driver had simply moved his car. Maybe he'd walked through the mud. Maybe the knocking had been some harmless misunderstanding. There had to be an explanation. I walked into the men's restroom to calm myself down. I went into a stall and sat there for a moment. Then I heard the bathroom door slowly squeak open. Someone had entered. The door clicked shut. Then I heard the lock turn. My heart started pounding. Footsteps moved slowly across the floor. They stopped at the stall beside mine. The person stepped inside. I looked down.
A pair of boots was visible underneath the divider. But the man wasn't facing the toilet. He was standing sideways, facing directly toward my stall. And he wasn't moving. Not even an inch. I knew right then that I couldn't wait to find out what he wanted. I slowly unlocked my stall. Then I pushed the door open and ran.
I didn't stop to think. I ran out of the men's room and toward my car. As I reached the parking lot, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The muddy footprints were now all around my driver's side door. They hadn't been there when I entered the restroom. I unlocked the car, jumped inside, and immediately locked the doors. Then I started the engine. As I reversed out of the parking space, I caught a glimpse of someone running from the restroom hallway. A tall man, green hoodie, dark pants. He disappeared behind the building before I could get a clear look at his face. I didn't wait. I drove out of that rest area as fast as I safely could. For a few seconds, I saw headlights behind me, the dark blue car. My heart started pounding. I accelerated. I was driving close to 90 miles per hour, constantly checking the rearview mirror. Then the headlights disappeared. I never saw the car again. For the rest of the drive to Florida, I stayed on edge. Every time I saw a dark blue Chevy on the highway, my heart jumped. Maybe it was him, maybe it wasn't. To this day, I still don't know what that man wanted. If he intended to rob me or hurt me, he had several opportunities. He could have confronted me in the parking lot. He could have followed me into the bathroom. He could have done something when I was trapped inside the stall. But he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, watching me, waiting. And that's what bothers me the most. I eventually reached Florida and never saw the man again. At least, not that I know of. But that experience permanently changed the way I use rest stops. If I'm driving alone and pull into a nearly empty rest area, I pay attention to everything. Where the other cars are parked, who's inside them, where the exits are, and most importantly, whether anyone seems to be watching me. I thought that strange night was something I'd eventually forget. I was wrong. Because years later, during another late-night road trip, I stopped at a rest area again. This time, my family was with me. My wife, Jules, my 2 daughters, and our dog, Bilbo. Everyone was asleep when we pulled in. I thought we were completely alone. Then I stepped out of the car and saw a man sitting on a bench outside the bathroom. He was staring directly at me. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Then he smiled, and somehow, he looked familiar. The man on the bench didn't look away. I stood beside my car for a moment, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But there was something about the way he watched me that made the back of my neck feel cold. I locked the car and hurried toward the men's restroom. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed a strange smell. It wasn't the usual smell you'd expect from a highway bathroom. It reminded me of something electrical burning. I ignored it. I just wanted to get back to my family. Then, while I was in the stall, the lights suddenly went out. Complete darkness. I waved my hand around, expecting motion sensors to turn them back on. Nothing happened. My phone was still in the car. Then I heard the bathroom door open. A faint line of light appeared beneath the door. Someone had entered. The door closed. And then I heard breathing. Slow. Heavy. Someone was standing near the entrance. I stayed completely still. I didn't know who this person was or why they had turned off the lights. I decided the safest thing to do was leave. I slowly opened the stall door. The instant I stepped out, the lights came back on. Nobody was there. I checked the other stalls. Every one of them was empty. I was alone. I walked over to the sink and started washing my hands. That's when the strange smell became stronger. I looked up at the mirror and froze. The man from the bench was standing directly behind me. I hadn't heard him enter. He was bald, probably around 50, wearing a button-up shirt and old-fashioned plaid pants. He looked completely out of place. I turned around. "What do you want?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me. His expression was completely blank. I stepped toward the exit. He slowly turned his body, following me with his eyes. Then, just before I opened the door, he finally spoke. His voice sounded strained.
"It's good to see you again." I stopped. Again. I had never seen this man before. At least, I was almost certain I hadn't. I walked outside. My family was still asleep in the car. But Bilbo was awake. And the moment I opened the door, he started barking at the bathroom. Not barking at me. Not barking at another car. At the bathroom. And then he suddenly pulled against his leash and ran straight toward the door.
Bilbo pulled so hard against the leash that I almost lost my grip. He wasn't behaving like a dog who simply wanted to explore. He was barking, growling, and whining at the same time. His eyes were fixed on the men's restroom. I had never seen him behave like that, not once. I tried pulling him back toward the truck. He refused. Then, somehow, he slipped free and sprinted toward the bathroom. "Bilbo!" I ran after him. He reached the door and started scratching at the bottom of it, whining desperately. I grabbed his leash and pulled him away. For some reason, he seemed terrified of whatever was inside. I finally picked him up and carried him back to the truck. The moment I closed the door, he became completely calm. He curled up like nothing had happened. That's when a thought hit me. The man. What if something had happened to him? I remembered that strange smell, the way he'd appeared behind me, the way he'd spoken, and the fact that I'd never actually seen him leave the bathroom. Maybe Bilbo had sensed that something was wrong. I got back out of the truck and walked toward the restroom. I pushed the door open. "Hey!" No answer. I looked inside. Empty. I checked the stalls from the doorway. Nothing. I even crouched down and looked underneath them. Nobody. The strange thing was, I hadn't seen the man leave. He couldn't have disappeared without me noticing. There was only one entrance, and I had been standing outside with Bilbo almost the entire time. I walked back toward the truck. That's when I realized something else. There wasn't another car in the rest area. Not one. The bench was empty. The bathroom was empty. The parking lot was empty. The man had simply vanished. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My wife and daughters were still sleeping. Bilbo was already snoring. For a few seconds, I just sat there in silence. Then I started the engine. I didn't look back. I drove for more than an hour before that horrible feeling in my stomach finally began to fade. I still don't know who that man was. I don't know how he appeared inside the bathroom without me hearing him. I don't know why he told me it was good to see me again. And I definitely don't know where he went. But there's one thing I know for sure. That rest stop wasn't normal. And even stranger, the man seemed to recognize me. The problem was, I had never met him before. Or at least, that's what I believed. Because years later, I started wondering if there was another explanation. Maybe the strangest part of the story wasn't the man disappearing. Maybe it was those words, "It's good to see you again." I couldn't stop thinking about them, until another completely unrelated encounter made me question whether I'd heard them before. And that's when my story took an even stranger turn.
For a long time, I tried to forget about the man at the rest stop. I never found an explanation for what happened. But then, during the isolation of 2020, I made another decision that would lead me into a completely different kind of nightmare. I had always been extremely introverted. Dating was difficult enough for me in normal circumstances. During lockdown, it became even worse. I worked from home, spent most of my time alone, and eventually decided to try dating apps. That's how I met Bianca. She seemed almost too perfect. She loved comic books, movies, science, and reading. Basically, everything I liked. Our conversations were effortless. Then we discovered something strange. We both loved Batman. I mentioned that I had a Batman tattoo on my triceps. She told me she had one too. I joked that I didn't believe her. A few minutes later, she uploaded a photo to her dating profile. There it was, a Batman symbol tattoo, on the exact same part of her arm. That was when something inside me said, "This is too perfect." But I was lonely, and I wanted to believe I'd finally met someone who understood me. We kept talking. Every conversation seemed to reveal another coincidence. Same movies, same books, same interests. Even the way we joked with each other felt strangely familiar. Eventually, Bianca suggested that we meet in person. I agreed, but before the date, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I searched her photos online. Nothing. No obvious fake profiles, no warnings, so I relaxed. That night, Bianca sent me a message. She said she had something funny to tell me. Then she wrote, "I think we've met before." I laughed and asked where. She didn't answer immediately. A few seconds later, another message appeared. "You don't remember the rest stop?" I stared at my phone. My entire body went cold. There was no way she could know about that. I had never told anyone about the man in the bathroom. Not my friends, not my family, nobody. Then another message appeared. "You looked scared that night." I stopped breathing for a second. I deleted the conversation, blocked her, and never went to meet her. To this day, I don't know who Bianca really was. Maybe it was an elaborate prank. Maybe someone had somehow found an old story I'd forgotten about. Or maybe there was a connection I still don't understand. But one thing has never left my mind. The man at that rest stop looked at me like he'd seen me before. Bianca knew about the rest stop, and both times, I was completely alone when it happened. So now, whenever I'm driving late at night and see a lonely rest area ahead, I keep going. Because sometimes the safest thing you can do